You can pack everything else perfectly and still ruin your cruise with one medication mistake. Cruise lines have gotten much less forgiving about CBD, controlled drugs, and even how you store a prescription in your cabin. The rule that catches people off guard most often is not even on the ship. It starts before you ever board, and by the time you find out, the ship has already sailed without you. So let's go through every rule that actually matters in 2026 step by step, so you walk on board clean and walk off the same way. Number 1, your carry-on is not a suggestion. The first rule is also the one people break most often. Every major cruise line tells guests the same thing. Keep every medication you actually need in your carry-on bag, not your checked suitcase and not that giant rolling case the porter takes at the curb. There are 3 reasons for this, and they all hit on day 1. Checked luggage can show up hours late. Sometimes it shows up the next morning. Cabins are often not ready until mid-afternoon, which means your bag could be sitting in a corridor somewhere while you're trying to find a cold drink. And the onboard medical center may not carry the exact replacement for what you take at home. So the logic is simple. If a medication matters on day 1, it belongs in the bag that never leaves your shoulder. Blood pressure pills, heart medication, insulin, inhalers, anything for anxiety or seizures, anything you would panic about losing. That bag is the priority. The suitcase is for clothes. A lot of cruisers split the difference and put a backup supply in the suitcase, which is fine. What you never do is put the only supply in checked luggage. Number 2, original packaging is not optional anymore. The pill organizer feels like one of those small life upgrades. You fill it on Sunday night and you know exactly what to take each morning. You don't have to fight with 7 bottles. That works beautifully at home. It stops working the moment you step into a cruise terminal. In 2026, the safest packing standard is original, labeled, prescription-issued containers. Security officers, customs agents, and ship medical staff all need to identify what you're carrying in under 10 seconds. A loose handful of small white tablets in an unlabeled plastic case is exactly how a 2-minute conversation turns into a 40-minute problem. Now, nobody is saying you cannot use your pill organizer on board. Plenty of cruisers fill theirs in the cabin on night 1. The rule is about getting on and off the ship. During embarkation, during customs, during any port check, the original labeled bottle is your friend. Keep it. If a medication is legitimate and labeled and matches your prescription, the conversation ends fast. If it's not labeled, the conversation is no longer about the medication. It's about who you are and what you're carrying. Number 3, prescription proof and the doctor's letter. This is where the preparation starts to feel more serious, and for good reason. A simple copy of your prescription is a smart move for almost every cruiser. It weighs nothing, it costs nothing, and it closes down a whole category of questions before they start. For some medications, though, a copy of the prescription is the bare minimum. A proper letter from your doctor becomes the real document. Narcotics sit at the top of that list. So do injectable medications, refrigerated medications, and anything that might raise an eyebrow at embarkation, in a port, or in a security line. The doctor's letter is not about proving you're sick. It's about proving the medication has a clear medical reason and a licensed prescriber behind it. Your name, the drug name, the dosage, the reason, and the doctor's contact details. That letter, sitting in the same pouch as the medication itself, does more to protect you than any single piece of paperwork you can bring. A good habit, and one seasoned cruisers swear by, is to pack paperwork with the medication, not in a separate folder somewhere else in your luggage. If the medication is in front of someone asking questions, the paperwork should be too, not 3 rooms away in your cabin safe. Number 4, pack extra, because the best practice is now very clear. Here's the rule every experienced cruiser learns, and usually the hard way. You do not pack enough medication for the cruise. You pack enough for the cruise, the flights on either side of it, and a disruption that nobody planned for. Carnival, Princess, and Norwegian all give the same recommendation in different words. Bring more than you think you need. Carnival and Norwegian specifically point out about 10 extra days of supply beyond the trip length. 10. Not 2, not 3, 10. Now that sounds like a lot until you think about what actually derails a cruise. A flight cancellation that pushes your return by 2 days. A medical stop in a port you were not supposed to visit. A mechanical issue that holds the ship at sea. A bout of norovirus that locks you in your cabin for 48 hours and you cannot refill without a new prescription. Any one of those eats into a medication supply fast. So the rule is not technically a rule, it's a cushion. And if nothing goes wrong, well, you just come home with 10 extra days of pills and a much calmer attitude about the trip you just finished. Number 5. CBD, THC, and medical marijuana are where people get blindsided. This is the section that trips up more cruisers than almost anything else on the list, because the mistake feels reasonable. A traveler picks up a legal CBD gummy at home, tosses it into the toiletry bag without thinking, and assumes legal at home means allowed at sea. It does not. Carnival, Princess, Norwegian, MSC, and Virgin all explicitly prohibit marijuana in some form. That includes medical marijuana with a valid card in a state where it is fully legal. Several of these lines also specifically ban CBD and THC products in general, including the gummies, the oils, the topical creams, the vape cartridges, and anything derived from either compound. Virgin's current prohibited items page carries an April 2026 date, which tells you this is not a decade-old policy that has gone stale. These rules are being actively maintained and actively enforced. The reason is not moral, it's jurisdictional. Cruise lines sail under flags of countries that do not recognize U.S. state marijuana laws, and they visit ports in countries where cannabis in any form is a serious criminal matter. So here's the honest summary. If you carry CBD or THC onto a cruise, even legally purchased in the United States, you're rolling the dice on 3 separate legal systems at once: the flag state, the port state, and the cruise line itself, which can disembark you and bar you from future sailings. Now before you pack it, check the line's current prohibited items list, not a list from 2 years ago, the current one. Number 6. Controlled medications are not the same as banned medications. Now, there is an important difference here because a lot of cruisers panic after hearing the CBD section and wonder whether their prescription anxiety medication or their pain medication falls into the same category. It usually does not. Controlled prescription medications are generally allowed on board with the right paperwork. That includes a lot of what cruisers actually travel with, from certain sleep aids to certain pain medications to prescription stimulants. The cruise line itself is not the problem. The problem is everywhere else the medication has to pass through. Cruise lines repeatedly warn that controlled substances are subject to airline rules, port country rules, and national drug control laws. A medication that's perfectly legal on the ship may not be legal in every country the ship visits. A medication you fly with through the United States may still run into issues in a port in Asia or the Middle East. The takeaway is simple. Prescribed does not automatically mean internationally permitted. A controlled medication needs its original bottle, its current prescription, and a doctor's letter that explains what it is and why you need it. And the earlier you check the port countries on your itinerary, the less chance you have of a nasty surprise at a gangway check. Now, if this is helping, hit the like button and subscribe, because the second half is where cruise medication mistakes start getting really expensive. Number 7. Methadone is a special case, and the ship may not be able to help. This section is one of the most useful in the entire video, because it involves a rule most cruisers have never heard, and it's also one that has to be handled honestly and without judgment. Carnival and Princess both state clearly that their ships do not stock methadone, and their onboard medical teams cannot assist with routine methadone care. That means no storage support, no dose monitoring, no controlled administration. If methadone is part of someone's ongoing treatment, the ship is not set up to be part of that care plan. And this is not about stigma. It's about the practical limits of what a shipboard medical center can do. A ship at sea cannot replicate the infrastructure of a licensed clinic. The medication cannot be dispensed on board, and there's no way for a cruise doctor to take over a program that is being managed by a specialist on land. For anyone on a methadone program, The right move is a direct conversation with the treating clinic well before booking, not after. A treating provider can lay out what is possible, what paperwork is needed, and in some cases whether cruising is actually a fit during a particular phase of treatment. The message is not, do not sail. The message is, do not assume the ship can fill a gap it's already told you it cannot fill. Number 8. A cabin fridge is not a medical refrigerator. Now this one catches so many cruisers that it almost deserves its own flashing warning sign. The little cooler inside a cruise cabin is not a refrigerator. It's a cooler. It keeps a soda cold enough to drink. It does not keep insulin at the temperature insulin needs. MSC says cabin coolers are not refrigerators and not suitable for refrigerated medication. Norwegian says cabin minibars are not suitable for temperature-sensitive medication. Princess actually gives a temperature range for stateroom refrigerators, which is useful because it lets cruisers see for themselves whether the range matches what their medication requires. In many cases, it does not. So what is the right move here? Request a proper medical refrigerator through the cruise line's special needs process before the cruise, not at the terminal. These are available on most major ships, but they are not automatic. Somebody has to request one, and the line has to assign one, and the request has to happen well ahead of sailing. The worst version of this mistake plays out on day 3, when a diabetic cruiser opens the minibar and realizes the insulin pen that's been sitting there for 72 hours does not feel cold enough. Now, do not gamble with temperature. Request the real fridge. Number 9. Needles, syringes, lancets, and sharps planning. Now, if you're using any injectable medication at all, from insulin to certain fertility treatments to any weekly injections for a chronic condition, the planning question is not about the medication, it's about the disposal. Princess says sharps need to go in a proper sharps container. Royal Caribbean's special needs process includes a request option for a sharps container, which tells you this is a real operational concern, not a small detail. You cannot drop used needles in a cabin wastebasket. You cannot throw them into a public bin on the pool deck. Housekeeping is not trained to handle loose sharps, and a cabin steward who gets stuck by one has a full incident report to write. The practical answer is to treat injectable medication like a small system rather than a single product. The medication, the needles, the alcohol wipes, a clearly labeled sharps container, and a place in the cabin where the container actually lives. Requested in advance through the cruise line special needs form well before boarding day. Done this way, injectable medication on a cruise is genuinely easy. Done as an afterthought, it becomes a daily problem that turns a vacation into a low-grade headache. Number 10. Some medical needs have to be arranged before the cruise, not at the terminal. This is the section that rewards cruisers who plan 30 days out and punishes cruisers who try to sort it out the night before sailing. Royal Caribbean's Guest Special Needs form is supposed to be submitted at the time of booking, or at a minimum 30 days before sailing. MSC also asks for early notice, ideally at booking or at least 30 days out, for a whole list of medical and accessibility requests. That 30-day window is not random. It gives the ship time to source equipment, make room in medical storage, coordinate port authorities, and load supplies at the right embarkation point. What actually gets arranged through that form? A medical refrigerator for temperature-sensitive drugs, onboard oxygen, distilled water for CPAP machines, extension cords from the cruise line, because you cannot bring your own in many cases, dialysis coordination, a sharps container as mentioned earlier, wheelchair or mobility scooter arrangements, hearing loops in theaters, dietary needs that go beyond a standard menu request. The terminal is not where these requests get solved. The terminal is where you find out whether the request you made a month ago actually went through, and by then, fixing the gap is basically impossible. So the rule is simple. If a cruise involves any medical need more complex than swallowing a daily tablet, the 30-day window is not a suggestion. It's the window that makes the rest of your trip possible. Number 11. Do not assume the ship pharmacy can bail you out. A lot of first-time cruisers have a mental model that the onboard medical center is basically a floating pharmacy. Run out of something? Just stroll down to deck 5, hand over your prescription, and walk out with a refill. It's not like that. Carnival, Norwegian, MSC, and Virgin all make the point, in slightly different words, that onboard medical and pharmacy support is limited. Exact replacements for a specific prescription are not guaranteed. Certain medications are impossible to source at sea. The medical center is designed to handle emergencies and short-term problems, not to replace a pharmacy you left behind on land. That changes how you should pack. Every essential medication should be treated as if a replacement on board will fail, because sometimes it will. Pack the original supply, pack the backup, pack the paperwork, and do not put yourself in a situation where the cruise depends on the ship's ability to fill a prescription it may not carry. If something does go wrong at sea, the medical center will do everything it can. That's not the question. The question is whether you want the success of your entire cruise resting on whether Deck 5 happens to stock the right drugs in the right dose on the right day. Number 12. The rule that can override everything. Port country law. Here's the rule that most cruisers never think about, and it's the one that can override every single other rule on the list. The cruise line can allow a medication. Your prescription can be valid. The airline can clear you. Every piece of paperwork can be in order, and a destination country can still create a problem at the gangway. Japan requires advance permission for certain controlled substances and warns clearly that some medications cannot be imported into Japan at all, even with a prescription from home. That includes medications that are common and unremarkable in other countries. The process is called yakan shomei, and skipping it does not go well. Singapore says certain medications require advance approval from the Health Sciences Authority and advises cruisers to apply at least 2 weeks before arrival if approval is required. That applies whether the medication is prescribed, over-the-counter, or herbal. The United Arab Emirates updated its guidance in late December 2025. Travelers can now either obtain prior electronic approval for certain medications or disclose them on arrival, depending on the case. Sounds flexible, but the key word is disclose. Walking through the UAE customs line with an undeclared controlled medication is not a flexible situation. Asian itineraries and Gulf itineraries are where this section stops being theoretical. If the cruise calls at any port in Japan, Singapore, the UAE, or anywhere in that wider region, the medication check is not just the cruise line. It's each of those countries, one by one. Now, the good news is that the process is not mysterious. Every one of these countries publishes current guidance on official government websites. 2 weeks of prep can clear months of worry. Packing medications for a cruise used to feel simple, but in 2026 it really is not. Rules have tightened across the major lines, enforcement has stepped up, and port countries are paying closer attention than they used to. The good news is that none of this is random. Every rule on this list has a reason, and every one of them has a workaround if you plan early. So pack early, document everything, and assume the strictest rule is the one that matters. Hit like, subscribe, and click the video on the screen for the next cruise breakdown. Your voyage is just beginning.